episode 92 of Grace and Steel. I'm Kevin Steele.
And I'm Kevin Michael Grace.
This show is a consideration of Zoe Quinn's memoir, Crash Override. How GamerGate nearly destroyed my life, and how we can win the fight against online hate. Now, if you don't know who Zoe Quinn is, then there's a good chance you're listening to this show because you like us. And if you do know who Zoe Quinn is, then I guess she needs no introduction. But you should understand why we are discussing this. You see, we believe Zoe Quinn is the quintessential victim. The victim of victims in our victim culture. She's been so victimized that she has victim-y PTSD. And she is taking heavy medication to combat the haunting victimhood memories of abuse, physical and virtual, from evil men who resent her, and women like her, entering the video game industry and succeeding wildly, with games like Depression Quest, and that's all, folks. And yet, this show is also a celebration of sorts. We'll be looking back with fondness to those heady days of GamerGate so long ago, 3 years ago, and reframing them in the light of the revelations so-called in this book. Kevin, what was the thing that most impressed you about Crash Override?
How empty the book is and how empty Zoe Quinn is.
Wow, that sounds impressive. Maybe you could quote a bit of that nothing. No, seriously.
Well, no, I'm not a First Amendment lawyer, she writes, so I'm not going to argue above my pay grade about the legal implications of free speech. But the beauty is, we don't have to. Online abuse isn't just an issue of rights, it's an issue of quality. I am a software engineer and designer. Just shut up right now. You are no kind of engineer.
Woo, woo.
Now, I'll just say that I would guess that I have actually done more coding in my life than Zoe Quinn. Years ago, decades ago, I taught myself Fortran and I taught myself Atari Basic. And using the latter, I wrote a program which was actually used in a commercial environment, a radio station. It wasn't a particularly complicated program, but there was a problem of communicating from the engineer's booth to the studio, and I used Atari Basic to solve that problem. Zoe Quinn talks about her career, and I'm wondering, what career would that be?
Well, hang on a second here. At the end of the book, there's a about the author section that says, quote, Zoe Quinn is one of the most critically acclaimed, widely recognized indie developers in the gaming industry.
Yeah. And how does that actually coincide with this idea that GamerGate nearly destroyed her life? It made her who she is today, to the extent that Hachette, which is one of the biggest publishers in the world, published her horrible, horrible book. Let's start with the title, Crash Override. Now, she does explain how this came about, and it is a reference to a movie called Hackers, which means I was pretty much right in my assumption that she picked the name of, well, this organization which supposedly helps people who have been ruined by online abuse. She got it from this movie, Hackers, but she chose it because it sounds computery.
Mm-hmm.
It has no actual meaning, and it is best known, the phrase, as a form of malware, a particularly virulent malware that comes from the Ukraine.
Okay. Well,
now,
actually sounds kind of appropriate.
Zoe Quinn, not her real name. Her real name is Chelsea Van Valkenburg. And
Cue the Valkyrie music, yeah.
Reading the book, it struck me, what do we know about this woman that we can say is true?
Well, this book doesn't clear very much of that up, let me tell you.
No.
Most of the book is not about her, so.
Well, no, and we called it in the intro a memoir, but...
You made me do that.
Well, okay, I made you do that. And reading the book is, it's like a lot of things. And there was a particular Selenian expression of disgust my impression of this book, which is so disgusting, I'm going to save it to the very end of the podcast. That is, after the credits. So that I don't want sensitive people to be put out. I don't mean that ironically either. It's just, this book is so disgusting in every respect, and it's a bait and switch. The book is bait and switch because Chelsea Van Valkenburg, a.k.a. Zoe Quinn, the only reason we know about her is because an ex-boyfriend with a name that sounds made up wrote a long piece about her and slut-shamed her. And I had assumed that Zoe Quinn couldn't get away, with avoiding the whole memo. Aaron Gonji, something like that.
Right, okay.
She was going to have to deal with the accusations made against her in this memo, and she pretty much doesn't.
She makes reference to it and says, it was completely disproven, and she never received any support.
It's so completely disproven, she doesn't feel the necessity to go into how it's disproven, for instance.
Or annotate anything.
Well, yeah, she has this really annoying habit of referring to things in a cute way so that you don't really know what she's talking about. And other things, I don't know. I get the impression that Zoe Quinn didn't write much of this book herself, because the book goes on about her agony, although she doesn't really explain how she was hurt by this. All right?
Yeah, okay.
And there's a whole bunch of...
That's what tips off the fact that it's a ghostwriter?
Well, what tips off the fact there's a ghostwriter is there's a whole bunch of 888 copy pasta. The book is 256 pages long, and about 150 pages of this or more are this copy pasta explaining, for instance, that the internet is based on popularity. Yeah, there's a revelation for you, right?
Yeah, okay. I found sentences like this that kind of made me think that she didn't write it. And I'll just quickly read this because this is where I would put this in. It's from chapter 10. Quote, "It pulls the issue out of hypothetical by putting the harm to faces and names and lives, and allows people to feel the reality of it instead of getting lost in jargon, theory, and debate. It avoids the cognitive backfire effect that comes along with signal-boosting lies to refute them by properly contextualizing disinformation and harm." Yeah, well, nothing I've heard from her or read from her prior to this makes me believe that sounds like her at all.
Derp, derp, beep, boop.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. It was written by one of her derp friends. Anyways, please continue after that. That was a sample for...
There is nothing in this book, nothing at all that rings true.
Mm-hmm.
The only things that ring true are the notes in passing.
Right.
For instance, this question of cheating, that Aaron in his memo says, and I'm quoting from the Encyclopedia Dramatica. She does mention that website in her book. Erin recounts how she spent all her first dates telling him how she never lies because her mother was a pathological liar, and how she never cheats because her ex-husband was emotionally abusive towards her, and how cheating on someone and then having sex with them without them knowing is literally rape. Now, Erin doesn't know very much about women, because when women talk about things, when they mention things constantly, it means that they're very interested in that subject. And if I met a woman who went on about cheating right from the very beginning and came up with this preposterous definition of rape, what I would take from that is, this woman's going to cheat on me a lot.
Yeah, I think that comes through pretty clearly. As I had mentioned to you in discussions prior to this show, that what I found interesting as I was reading the book, it seemed to be written to very much avoid any accusations that she might be overly sexually active, or any it's written to avoid any accusations of being a slut, as far as I'm concerned.
Let's look at the signifying, okay?
Well,
she changes her hair color how many times a week? She's got a plug, or whatever you want to call it, in her lip. She also has the problem glasses.
Yeah.
There is a strange section in the book, right at the beginning of her horror, when the memo went live, when she's going on about this great love of her life, who had a job waiting for him in France, which is like, is this like the professional equivalent of, yeah, well, the reason you don't see my girlfriend is because she's in Canada, okay?
That's right.
The job in France, which I'm tempted to believe never existed. But then she mentions that there was some guy that she just met and she went back to his place. Then nothing, of course, happened. But, like, who does that?
I think that was at the Seattle point. She was living in Seattle.
Okay, who does that, by the way?
Zoe Quinn. And,
yeah, okay.
Well,
Zoe
let
Quinn
me say
does
that in my wayward youth that I knew women that did that.
Okay.
And
all right. It was just an odd thing to include in the book because you're quite right that she's written a memoir in which she has to a very large extent taken herself out of her own memoir. Now, let's start at the beginning. She uses this word queer to describe herself, and I may be stealing someone else's joke, but for a lesbian, she sure sleeps with a lot of guys.
Yeah, you actually are stealing someone else's joke. There's a big write-up on that Return of Kings site back in 2014 about that, where it makes that very accusation. Because I guess she's been doing this queer claim for quite a while. Anyways.
Well, you see, it's somewhat clever in that she doesn't call herself a lesbian because we know what a lesbian is. A lesbian is a woman who has sex with other women. But queer means something different. Exactly what it means, no one knows. But you may have seen that Zoe Quinn put up a piece on Tumblr, of course Tumblr, called Agender. Now, she later removed it, but Wikipedia, which has a very strongly pro-Zoe entry on her.
They even follow her pronouns.
They follow her pronouns. And
they for her.
They mention this fact that Zoe is transitioning. Or maybe Zoe is transitioning. My entire life, she writes, I have not been a girl or a woman. Yeah, okay, sure. But you see what's going on here is that it just becomes so tiresome in the book where she talks about privilege, and marginalized people, how we have to listen to marginalized people, especially black women, for some reason. Because black women are very big in the computer industry, as we know. And so she has to pour mouth up a storm that she was the victim of this violence, physical violence and virtual violence. Now, the physical violence is apparently she got some bruises the last time she saw Aaron. She doesn't explain how she got bruises. I can think of many ways in which a woman could get bruises from a man that has nothing to do with physical abuse.
I think he probably just grabbed her arm as she was trying to leave.
She talks about PTSD. Now, after, accusing other people of having mental illness, she proudly claims to have a mental illness. And guess what? There's no post involved. Oh, so what she is suffering is worse than, say, soldiers who've come back from several tours from Afghanistan and Iraq. Now, starting at the beginning, now, what she's done here is a reverse George Clooney, okay? Because there were all these rumors, getting hotter about George Clooney being homosexual. So he did the traditional thing in that he got married. Again, he'd been married as a young man, but he got married again. And, I would suggest that maybe he shouldn't have married an ugly 40-something Arab lawyer. But,
Pregnant again, by the way.
Yeah, well, they can't keep their story straight about this baby. Which seemed to be, indicate that someone else had the baby, but,
Well, no, there's another one that they're...
Oh, okay. All right, the first one didn't take?
No, it's an expanding family, you know. And he's getting all teary-eyed about it. But anyways.
Anyway, so Zoe is doing a reverse George Clooney. That she has made herself into a queer, because we all know that queers, whatever they are discriminated against. So, you know, she's discriminated against because she's a woman, but she's a cis woman, or she used to be a cis woman. So, you know, not very many Pokemon points there, as Steve Saylor would say. And she's got the PTSD, and so now she's genderqueer, or just queer.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Zoe Quinn claims a lot of things about herself. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't know that we can assume that any of them are true. She claims that her middle name is Tiberius.
Yeah.
Now, why would she be called Tiberius?
I don't. Well, she chose that, obviously. Right?
Well, she tweeted out a picture of her passport. Now, the idea that her parents, who supposedly one of them was a biker, who ran some sort of unsuccessful motorcycle shop, and her mother supposedly ran some sort of
kennel business.
Kennel business.
Mm-hmm.
Tiberius was, of course, the Roman emperor who, rightly or wrongly, is considered the most depraved of all, and his depravity supposedly involved children.
Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here with a theory and say that Tiberius was the name of a dog that her mother boarded at some point.
Yeah, okay.
I just came up with that, folks, hey?
No, but I mean, there's nothing... See, there's a kind of... You know this phrase from Nabokov, from Lolita, the cunning of the insane?
Yeah, that's one you
get a very strong sense of, you know, the cunning of the insane from Zoe Quinn. Yeah. But, you know, oh yeah, my middle name is Tiberius. Well, you must have given yourself that name, and if you know anything about Tiberius, here's another thing. Zoe Quinn gives the impression, having read her Memoir, that she has not read a single book in her life. Not a single book in her life.
You're showing up my Tiberius theory. Thank you.
Well, yeah. There is a reference, and I'll find it here. I'll just search for it and find it, which, I fell down an internet rabbit hole, looking to expose myself to the darkest things I could find online. I became infatuated with sites like Rotten.com, a site with the slogan Archive of Disturbing Illustration, that hosted pictures of autopsies and accidents and all kinds of fetishes. I felt like I could look at the worst humanity had to offer. I'd be prepared for anything, and nothing could shock or scare me. I didn't want to be pure. I wanted to go on adventures and roll around in the kind of filth that Oscar Wilde and Hunter S. Thompson had written about. She obviously has no idea who Oscar Wilde was. Because, you know, his Edwardian drawing room comedies are not about filth. Now, if she's clearly not read the picture of Dorian Gray, many things are suggested in this book. They are not spelled out because Oscar Wilde wasn't that kind of writer.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Oscar Wilde famously said, "We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars." Zoe has never looked at the stars. Zoe is peering into her own anus. She has an obsession with scatology. She mentions repeatedly through the book that she wants to write her games about failure, feelings, and farts. The number of references to farts and to shit and to turd. Can you imagine what it'd be like to be in the same room as that woman? But again, let's go back to the beginning. Her hard scrabble upbringing in small town upstate.
That should be in an elevator shaft.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, in upstate New York. I don't believe any of it.
Okay.
You see, there's certain touches that when people are writing about their own lives, they will leave markers. They will say certain things which would make sense if you knew the place where they came from.
Right.
Now, she complains that she was born too early to be a hipster, and I thought, you don't know what hipster means, do you? Because there have always been hipsters. The nature of what constitutes hip is constantly changing. But she doesn't understand this. She complains about wearing hand-me-down clothing, I believe, although she doesn't claim to have any brothers or sisters. So where these hand-me-downs would come from. Zoe Quinn was born in 1987, which was shortly before the birth of grunge, which was kind of a big thing. And I wonder, has Zoe Quinn even heard about grunge? Because in the 90s, when she was a girl, everyone started dressing down and wearing lumberjack shirts and
That's right.
the like. But she doesn't seem to know this. She doesn't understand the history of the computing business, home computers at all, talking about how, apparently she lived in a time before games were big. No, wrong. Because you ever heard, I mentioned this company before, Atari?
Vaguely, yes.
Yeah, there was Atari and there was a Commodore 64, and games were huge in the 1980s, in the middle 1980s. Arguably, they were bigger than they ever were in terms of, how would I say, to the extent that everyone was involved in this.
Yeah.
I mean, there were certain games like Pac-Man and Ms. Pac-Man and a few others that virtually everyone in America and Canada played.
Asteroids, that was my big thing as way back when.
Now, she doesn't mention, she has spun this myth, or falsehood rather, about being obsessed by computers from a very early age. So this allows her not to talk about anything else that young people are interested in. For instance, television or videos. I suspect that if Zoe Quinn was as poor as she claims, but I know that's not true because we've identified her grandfather, her late grandfather, who seems to be kind of a pillar of the community.
Hold it here. I missed this. Did you find this out before discussing it with me? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. A death notice, an obituary for Granddad.
Oh, okay.
Has been shown up on sites.
Maternal?
So she didn't have a VCR, and she didn't have a few tapes that she played over and over again, like all children growing up at that time did. She didn't have
She played them at other people's places.
Well, I'm going to ask you this. I came to the conclusion that the kind of family that she's describing would have had a big satellite dish in the backyard. You think so?
Well, if they didn't, then they spent a lot of money on movies, renting movies, VCRs, the videotapes and that.
Yeah, but I mean, children, you see, I have a daughter who's a millennial, just a couple of years younger than Zoe Quinn. And, I saw this with my other children, these TV stations like YTV, which is a Canadian network, but of course she would have been able to get that in upstate New York. That they become obsessed with stations like this at a young age, and they watch these shows like Sailor Moon, over and over and over again, right? There is none of that in the book. She claims that she was a musician as a teenager, and all of the pain, right? But she worked through that pain with music. I think she's lying. She doesn't even
does she mention any band?
She doesn't even mention what instrument she played. Now, the book could have been enlivened. She could have mentioned, and this is a well-known cliche. Oh, here are some of the ridiculous band names that we had, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Worst of all,
this is where we practice.
Worst of all, she doesn't mention music at all. Like favorite bands, there's none of that. None of that. So I think she made this all up.
Okay.
Now
someone made it up for her.
Yeah. She claims that her family was too poor for virtually everything. And I'm thinking, what about grandparents? Grandparents, don't they send you a check? Christmas time, birthday? Grandparents in the vicinity, particularly an only child like Zoe, one could expect, gifts on a regular basis from grandparents, but grandparents aren't mentioned. And the treatment of her parents is very strange.
Oh, yes. Let's get to the core here.
Like Dad, supposedly some sort of biker, and Dad apparently liked Rob Zombie, which, as far as I remember, is the only reference to music in the entire book. Right, and he ran some sort of unsuccessful motorcycle business, which was never specified exactly what it was that he did.
Except that he collected a lot of parts, and they were in the yard.
He collected a lot of parts, and so we'll get to Mom in a minute, because Mom's more important. But she claims she had some sort of Franken-computer, bits of throwaway bits. She also claims she had an 8-inch disk drive. No. 8-inch disk drive? Come off it. Everyone's using...
My dad had one.
What?
My dad had one.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, good luck trading discs. But, see, interesting thing is that people who are interested in computers or interested in anything tend to be rather specific about their likes. You must have noticed this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you like music, don't you? Yes, I like music. Generic music. So I'm not going to mention any bands or singers that I like because it's all the same to me. No, that's the opposite of how reality works. Now, why doesn't she tell us about this Franken computer? Like, what the bits were what? Made by what company? What kind of operating system was it? Because that's the sort of thing that people who are interested in computers are interested in. And
it also puts it in a time and place, too.
Yeah, there's also the nostalgia market. Because if I discovered this myself, that there are sites on the internet, and, sometimes on Friday night, have a couple of beers, and, hey, yeah, that video game that I liked, back in 1985, yeah, here it is, and here's the box. And here's some screen captures or a little video of play, and I thought, wow, I hadn't thought about this for decades, and here it is, right? So she could have tapped into that, but that would presuppose that she actually did any of these things.
Right.
You see, she has to establish herself as someone who's obsessed with games from a very early age, and I don't believe that she was obsessed with games.
So she failed in her establishing cred with you.
You see, why wasn't she trying to write video games? Why wasn't she learning any form of computer language? Because she doesn't know any form of computer language now. We'll get into that later, but let's talk about Mom.
Well, yeah, let's just finish up with Dad quickly, because Dad gets a mention because apparently he got doxxed at some point, and she showed some concern for her dad. Sounded like she, had some affection for her.
Zoe doxed herself. Sorry to interrupt. She doxed herself, and oh my God, they've gone after my father. And they actually printed his phone number. Well, she's too stupid not to realize that having an area code of 808 means Hawaii, not New York State.
Oh, really? Is
yes.
That what she did? Okay. I did. Okay. Anyways, the point being that she showed some affection for her father, maybe because he got doxxed. Now, for her mother, do you want to take it away here? I have all the quotes, the references.
Well, no. Why don't you read some of this? The horror.
Yeah, okay, so we do get in Chapter 2 most of this, she mentions that, quote, I saved up a summer's worth of allowance from scraping dog turds out of the kennels of my mum's boarding business to buy The Lion King, and lucked into a copy of Pokemon for Christmas. Okay, so we learn that Mum boarded dogs, but then we learn that she was ill as well. Still in Chapter 2, my already rocky home life was growing increasingly chaotic. My parents had started to go through a brutal divorce, and my mum messed with my head to try to use me against my dad in and out of court. Her health had recently taken a turn for the worse. She had been diagnosed with hepatitis C before we understood much about how to treat the disease. After the divorce was finalized, it fell to me to help her inject her medicine and carry her to the bathroom and tell her she was still beautiful, while her hair was falling out, and she was aggressively taking out her medication-induced depression on me. And then when she had her lesbian experience, she talks about concerning herself with her mom. I ran home in the snow immediately afterward, freaked out, praying that my religious mom wouldn't be able to tell something was different about me. So, yeah.
No, well, I just want to interrupt to say that, freshman year of high school, I lost my virginity to a cute girl in the senior class. It isn't likely against the law. I don't believe this story at all. Zero.
Right.
She just said, "Oh no, I'm queer," and she uses this. She said she was afraid of some sort of giant marquee reading "Big Queer Lady Kisser." Oh, not lesbian, not lesbo, not leser, not lesy. Big Queer Lady Kisser. Again, this myth. Oh, I'm queer, and I've always been queer, and I'm transitioning, or maybe, or not. So I ended up vehemently denying it and closing myself off. Sorry, Amanda. Closing yourself off to the older woman who told the whole school, supposedly, that she'd had you. She can't even keep her story straight or reasonable within a single paragraph.
Yes, that's true. Well, she does mention that at that time her, quote, "My relationship with my mother was at an all-time low, and I barely spoke to my father outside of state-mandated weekend visits where we'd go to the movies and get Chinese food." And, let's see, is this the last one here? "I didn't want to be told that my mom would just get better and one day that drugs would cure her. I wanted to face the fact that she was dying and that I would someday too." Okay, so there you go. "I became hyperfixated on mortality, but since I thought I was too gay to be welcomed into religion, I dove headfirst into books on," wait for it, existentialism.
Yeah, sure you did. Sure you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can just imagine Zoe Quinn. Okay, so now we're on to Jean-Paul Sartre.
Yeah.
Having got Kierkegaard out of the way.
Anyways, yeah, so that whole spazola there about her mom, that's it. We don't hear anything else about her mom.
She disappears from the story.
Forever, except we think there is a mention near the end of the book where she talks about taking an absence from this or that because she was dealing with the death of a close relative that she did not want to publicize. That's all she says. What relative, she doesn't say.
Well, you see this, what does that mean, a close relative? Because she has identified 2 family members in her entire book, and who could the other close relative be?
Well, she talks. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's left hanging.
Is it possible? Is it possible that she is such a bad writer, or that her ghostwriter is such a bad writer that this was in fact a reference to her mother dying, but that let's just forget all of that sob sister stuff about my miserable childhood and about how my parents wrecked my childhood with, among other things, their mental illness. For someone who wants to eliminate the stigma from mental illness, there's certainly a lot of crazy shaming in this book, isn't there?
Yeah, oh yeah. And the mother seems to take a fair brunt of it right there, with her Zoe claiming that she had to carry her to the bathroom and inject drugs for her. That sounds like a fairly severe invalid, yet this is taking place, I assume, by her timeline here. This is taking place at least 10 years before GamerGate.
Yeah, but it sounds like AIDS.
Yeah, okay. If
it sounds
AIDS,
like it sounds like this is drugs? Like the AIDS death. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's something else that rings false, horribly, horribly false. 3 months later, I divorced my husband, packed up what little I had, threw my cat in my car, and escaped Albany's seemingly oppressive gravitational pull. Why seemingly, Zoe? By moving to Toronto to pursue photography and the abstract notion of, quote, making it as an artist in a real city. Canada's a sovereign country. Ontario is not a province. Since it's not an American state, you just can't pack up and move to Toronto. You need to get a visa, a work visa, or a student visa. And this typically involves hiring an immigration lawyer.
Can't you get a cat across the border?
Well, yeah, there is that too as well. I suspect that there is a lot more money in her family than she's letting on.
Okay. Tell us about this grandpa. What did he do? Was he a pillar of the community you mentioned?
Oh, yeah, well, he's, I don't know whether I have the obituary in front of me, you know.
Make it up like Zoe.
What? No, I just remember seeing a picture of this guy, right?
Yeah.
He just looked very, pillar of the community. I mean, I guess it's, it's kind of a boomer story, isn't it?
I guess.
Her parents seem like feckless boomers.
Yeah, there's not enough there. I mean, it should be mentioned that she had, at one time, pitches or proposals for a movie from this book. And that all went away, and I can only assume that the reason it disappeared is because somebody got a copy of the book and looked at it and said, there's not enough here for a movie.
Yeah, Edward Litvak's coup d'etat was turned into a movie starring Peter O'Toole.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I mean, you would have to create a lot of stuff.
Robert Van Valkenburg, grandfather of Zoe Quinn, 9/9/1932 to 5/27/2016. There's a guy here, the picture of him looks like he's in his 70s, and he's wearing some sort of, he's wearing a baseball cap that seems to have some sort of professional, like a union. You know, the emblem on the front would seem to indicate that he was a member of some union or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. Robert Van Valkenburg is Zoe Quinn's grandfather who lived his whole life as an Athens, New York resident. He has 5 children and 10 grandchildren, and Zoe Quinn is one of the 10 grandchildren in the Van Valkenburg bunch. Yeah, there's the cousins, right? So, yeah, this nuclear family that she describes is very nuclear indeed. Because there's mom, dad, and her, and there doesn't seem to be any antecedents, right?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
They just fell out of the sky. But
no
of course...
aunts and uncles?
Aunts and uncles. Cousins. I guess the biggest disappointment in this book, you know, the big bait and switch is that I felt like Milhouse Van Houten in the famous Poochie episode of The Simpsons. That reading this book, just finding myself whining, when is she going to get to the Five Guys burgers and fries?
It does get glanced over, but I mean, it does get mentioned that the accusation was there. But the first reference to the accusation, it was only one guy. And then later on in the book, it's mentioned that the accusation was 5 guys. So... maybe that was the part that was written by somebody else. I'm not sure. Difficult to say. Like I say, I had a hard time accepting the fact that she wrote very much of this.
Well, let's talk about her game Depression Quest. This is what she is supposedly famous for. Now, Depression Quest is written in a program called Twine. Which is a program which is devised so that people can write, as it were, computer programs without knowing any computer language. There is no description in the book of her writing the game that supposedly made her famous, or how many other people were involved. What did they do? Again, the incompetence of this book. A large part of the audience would presumably be young women who, you know, the patriarchy isn't going to keep me out of computers, right?
Right, and this is how she did it.
Yeah, why don't you tell us how you did it? Huh?
Yeah.
Nope. Oh,
we should mention in passing that the bulk of the book is basically a setup for her organization Crash Override.
Yeah.
It talks an awful lot about internet safety and bullying.
Okay, but you see... I sort of wondered about my sanity reading this book because it's one of those situations where, oh, no, I had read up to 186, not 148. Those passages that I read, which seemed awfully familiar, it was because I'd read them already. She carries on, she does this about 4 times in the book. She goes on about the tremendous work that she and others have done in putting an end to online abuse and helping people who've been affected thereby. And then immediately into, but it doesn't matter because the companies don't care. They don't care. They're only interested in money and popularity. And then a few pages later, oh, the tremendous work, the great strides. And then right back into, it doesn't matter. Nothing's getting better. Oh, woe is me. Woe is us. No, but this failure. Okay, just hang on a second. I worked in various roles on other people's games. Doing what, I wonder? While trying to make my own comedy game about online dating. It was my first long-term game, so naturally I failed fast and badly, learning all of my hard lessons along the way. This failure led inadvertently to my first hit depression quest. First hit? What were the other hits?
Technically correct.
What were the other hits?
No, but you see, that's technically correct, isn't it? That is her first hit. There's no second hit yet.
I was at the bottom of a depressive spiral. Oh, I want to mention this, because if you look at the Wikipedia entry on her, which is a disgrace.
But like I say, fun to read because of the pronouns.
Yeah, fun to read because of the pronouns. Okay, so I'm reading from Wikipedia. Quinn was born in 1987, grew up in a small town near the Adirondack Mountains in New York. Growing up, she often played video games. A favorite of hers was Commander Keen, an MS-DOS game featuring an 8-year-old protagonist who builds a spaceship with items found around his house and then travels the galaxy defending Earth. As a teenager, she suffered from depression and was diagnosed with the condition at the age of 14. She has described receiving little sympathy or assistance from school district officials and says that they were, quote, less than understanding about teens with depressions and suicide issues. This is from the New Yorker story about her. Now, First of all, this isn't true. It's obviously untrue because schools now are largely babysitting and depression. Oh, man. I mean, what are the guidance counselors there for? And the therapists. We're supposed to believe that in New York State, which is one of the, shit-libbiest of all the shit-lib states, that a teenage girl says she suffers from depression and is diagnosed with it, no less. And the school says, we're here to learn, not indulge your fantasies. No, sorry. It's the opposite of that. Now, it gets better because
maybe they didn't care because she wasn't there.
Yeah, well, you see, I was looking to see how she would handle this in her book. None of this is in the book. She talks about her teens at great length, doesn't mention depression, and it doesn't mention being diagnosed with depression. You see, this book had a very bad effect on me because it's like living inside the mind of a psychopath. And, these people, they juggle so many lies that they can't keep them straight. After I read this book, I reread Pierce Paul Reed's book, Alive, which is about the Uruguayan plane that crashed in the Andes in 1972. There's all manner of horror in this book. Sudden violent death, long, lingering, horribly painful death, starvation, freezing, the stink of living in an airline fuselage for months, cannibalism, smashing heads with an axe in order to eat the brain. That book was less horrifying than Zoe Quinn's book. One of the reasons being that in Alive, there's recognizably human figures in it. And there is nothing, none of this, it's not specific. She talks about, her boyfriend or her first husband. Apparently he was a bad guy. How was he a bad guy? Well, no, you're not even going to favor us with a paragraph about this? Right? Give some sort of indication why you didn't like this guy that you chose to marry. And then she's talking about her, this love of her life. Then they broke up romantically because of GamerGate. He was the guy with the mysterious job in France. Yeah,
apparently it looks like he's still around too.
She talks about living in an elevator shaft, and I'm thinking, I don't know what that means, and the chronology as to why she felt trapped in this apartment. Why didn't she just get another apartment? She's moving all over the United States constantly. She's appearing at conferences and, speaking engagements. You get paid thousands of dollars to do that, you know? And
I think they were staying in the elevator shaft because they were on their way to France,
Oh.
The big romantic job in France. Yes.
No, this game, let's talk about Depression Quest, okay?
Ugh, okay.
Because it is called a game, all right?
Yeah, okay.
In what sense it's a game, I can't imagine. It's been described as a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, with a couple options. Oh, you answered this, so you go over here. It's kind of like...
Well, no, you see, the sensible things to do are, they're not available. They're shown, but you're not allowed to do them because you're depressed. Now...
Oh, okay.
I first noticed about 20 years ago that a great many young women are in love with the idea of depression. And they think that the whole world is in love with their depression. That's really? The strange thing. That, you see, I think there's one of the reasons why Zoe has to go towards the, she's not a girl, because depression. Well, why don't you find a young woman who doesn't claim to be depressed? Mm-hmm. This woman is a tumbler. She's a hustler. This sort of thing is not associated with depression.
Yeah, I suppose.
It's not associated with the depression of the clinical sort. It's typically associated with being too depressed to get out of bed.
Right, yep.
Not hustling up a storm, hustling men, hustling video game companies, hustling the world, which is what she's done. But, she talks about humor all of the time. Oh, she wants to make these funny games. She has the worst sense of humor. She has no sense of humor.
There isn't any in the book, anyway.
No, she makes these jokes. She makes these jokes, and they're along the genre, the ex-boyfriend from hell, with a lobotomy. She mentions Francis Bacon.
They sound funny when you say them.
Yeah, she mentions Francis Bacon. She drags him into the book. He said knowledge is power. That's not what he said. But never mind that. It's attributed to him. Now, she doesn't like bacon. The most overrated food in the world. That's the only reason she mentions bacon. So she can let the world know that she doesn't like bacon. And of course, you gotta ask yourself, what sort of person doesn't like bacon? Bacon
only
is delicious.
Evil people. Yes.
Well, she's a vegan, right?
Oh, is she?
I believe she mentions that in the book.
Okay.
But I was thinking, okay, depression, a lot of the things that depressed people do. Why, the options in this game? How come there isn't the option to, drink 12 beers while listening to Joy Division? Or for classicists, drink a pint of scotch while listening to Hank Williams? Or for hipsters, drink artisanal vermouth while listening to Neutral Milk Hotel?
Okay. That's option B there. Hank Williams. But I wanted to update this a little bit and just bring it into the present before we go too far out on a limb talking about Zoe's game. She did get reviews, and Polygon had a very positive review of this book. Basically, it was a rehash of GamerGate, taking the narrative, the one that was so widely discredited, that this was all about abusing women. There's really no mention of it being about the corruption of journalism, games journalism, which anticipated, of course, the Donald Trump campaign.
We haven't really talked about GamerGate. I mean, the memo asserts that she slept with 5 men in the video game industry for the benefit of her career, that she slept her way to the middle, as it were. And this Aaron fellow later made the assertion that she slept with this person called Maya Felix Kramer, also known as Lego Butts, who was a huge deal in the video game industry, a PR spiff, and who was associated with all of these companies and all of these judging panels, right?
Yeah.
Maya Kramer does not appear in Zoe Quinn's book.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if she's looking for lesbian cred, you think she'd mention this woman, right?
Right.
But strangely, not in the book.
Yeah, I'm going to eliminate all possible search terms so that you can't look any of this story up on the internet. That's what it seemed like to me. So
yeah. So the GamerGate was a reaction to, well, a couple of things. One, this corruption within the industry, and two, SJW-ism being shoved down the throats of gamers, and they very much did not want it. Now, Zoe Quinn, she doesn't seem to be very familiar with the phrase SJW. She has these terrible footnotes in the book, which are supposed to be funny.
And not very useful,
No, she's one of these women, who's always saying, oh, I got a great sense of humor. Yeah, it's saying that you have a great... Well, I'll put it a different way. People who say that they have a great sense of humor don't.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, enter Chuck Tingle. He's a niche self-published author of such erotica classics as Pounded in My Butt by My Own Butt. But I told you about her obsession with excrement.
Okay, you don't need to refer to it
No, I'm not going to refer to it again, but there's just another example, okay?
That would be shitty.
Yes. And, yes, an adult man used SJW, shorthand for social justice warrior, in an actual book title, which is shorthand for I'm a frothing baby and hate people who don't hate the same people that I hate.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so I guess she's referring to Vox Day here. SJW is a term, it's a common term, and she gives the impression that she just ran into it.
Yeah. It's just made up stuff.
This book is flagrantly dishonest because it's all about healing and restorative justice. And can we really blame these people? Because, what terrible things happen to them to make them trolls? And she flies off the handle and goes into these rages against people, babies and turds and all this. She can't, she can't keep her story straight within the book or even in the chapter. She writes about Lee Alexander, who wrote a famous essay for Gamma Sutra called, what is it called? Gamers Are Over?
Gamers don't have to be your audience. Gamers are over. That's it. From August 28th, 2014. Got it in front of me now.
She makes the assertion that the horrified or angry reaction from gamers about this piece. Yeah, I'll just read from this. In the early days of GamerGate, journalist Lee Alexander wrote a piece about how games as a medium and an industry had expanded beyond a subculture and into the mainstream, and now included too many different people and creative works to be quantified as a single demographic. She published this piece on Gamma Sutra, a website that runs news blogs, job postings, and editorials by and for people working in the game industry. Instead of reading it as an optimistic Go Us piece that it was, GamerGaters launched an entire operation and letter-writing campaign to Gamma Sutra demanding that she be fired. At the same time, they compiled and listed every company that advertised on the website and assembled a repository of resources, including instructions on how to maximize the amount of trouble they could cause to these companies. Sure enough, several advertisers either didn't bother to verify facts as basic as, does Gamma Sutra actually target consumers as a demographic? It doesn't. Well, it does. And was the article the discriminatory and hateful screed they'd heard about? No. Well, yes, it was. Or they checked and didn't care. Oh, and as far as I know, no one has ever apologized to Lee. This is this piece by Alexander, it reads like a suicide note, or at least a resignation letter.
Right.
That gamers, particularly men or boys, they're just the most stupid, pathetic, horrifying people on earth, that they're a bunch of robots who buy all this stuff that they don't need because someone tells them to.
Yeah.
Now,
can I read a paragraph?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Because I did, this is the one that caught me. This is near the end. Quote, developers and writers alike want games about more things and games by more people. We want, and we are getting, and will keep getting, tragicomedy, vignette, musicals, dream worlds, family tales, ethnographies, abstract art. We will get this because we are creating culture now. We are refusing to let anyone feel prohibited from participating. The reason I flagged that is because I, of course, wanted to go look at the how games have changed since she wrote this in 2014. And, the top 20, top 10 video games, I didn't see anything about abstract art in there.
There were no ethnographies?
No musicals. Maybe Family Tales in the sense that, there were these empire building games. But there you go. So if they've managed to create this stuff in the ensuing 3 years, it really hasn't been marketed very well.
Well, essentially, you see, Vox Day has written about this at length. You see the same thing happening with games that you've seen in the science fiction industry.
Right.
That a bunch of talentless women and male allies have insinuated themselves and taken it over and, wrecked it. Yeah. And let's have books about women falling in love with, dinosaurs? Velociraptors?
Yeah, okay.
Whatever. Let's rewrite the Cinderella story as lesbian S&M.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just finish off this very positive article as Zoe Quinn characterized it, right? This is the last 3 paragraphs, very short, okay? Quote, gamer isn't just a dated demographic label that most people increasingly prefer not to use. Gamers are over. That's why they're so mad. These obtuse shit-slingers, these wailing hyper-consumers, these childish internet arguers, they are not my audience. They don't have to be yours. There is no side to be on. There is no debate to be had.
There is no debate to be had, otherwise, kill yourself.
Mm-hmm. There's what's past and there's what's now. There's the role you choose to play in what's ahead. Yeah, the last sentence is positive, but the rest of it is just, I'm afraid, as she characterized it, shit-slinging.
Well, no, maybe Zoe Quinn can't read. No, maybe she literally can't read because
it would be typed out comments on.
It would be impossible for any honest person to read Lee Alexander's piece and not conclude that it was an angry diatribe aimed at Gamasutra's audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the thing is, she doesn't mention the fact that there was a concerted campaign of gamers are dead, gamers are over in that same week. That, of course, the anti...
let's talk about this. That this is one of the biggest scandals in the history of journalism. That about 20 pieces were published in the worldwide media, the English language media, including in Canada's conservative paper, the National Post, that were essentially the same piece, although there are 20 different writers credited. And they were all published within the space of 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And this was obviously a concerted campaign by a conspiracy, by a cabal to manufacture consent on this issue.
Sure, but this was all foreshadowing. This is what we saw in the Trump era, and that's why so many people connect them, right? Is the reason that GamerGate and the Trump campaign get connected because there was so much corruption in the media. Trump called them out. First, gamers called them out. They just kind of, that resentment was always there. Gamers didn't discover it. That resentment was building. But, the issue that they were dealing with, that got transferred to the general media in a big way, huge way, and it changed the country. That's why they connected, simply because, they identified the issue in GamerGate and they hammered it home. And then Trump comes along and says it's,
there is no debate. There is no debate.
Oh,
you saw the same thing with Trump. Right? Trump is a Nazi. There is no debate. Anyone who supports Trump is a Nazi. There is no debate.
Yeah, there's no side to be on. That's right. There's only one side here. You saw that over and over again with Trump. Yeah, the same jargon that they were using, in the GamerGate thing, what they were using in the Trump campaign, only on a larger scale, writ much larger on the canvas of the country.
Oh, I mentioned at the beginning of this show that women have this habit of letting you know, and they don't know that they're doing it, that they're very interested in certain things.
Mm-hmm.
This swatting business, the number of references to swatting, it's terrifying enough to live under a constant avalanche of threats, hatred, and bile when it's from strangers who hate you. It's another thing entirely when they start getting cops to threaten you for them. Swatting is one of the most serious ways online abuse can endanger your physical safety. Swatting is when false reports are made to the police, which result in your door being kicked down and such like, and a pistol being held to your head. Do you get the impression that Zoe Quinn was fond of swatting people herself? Get that impression?
Kinda. Yeah, I did. And what I thought was, this really hasn't been talked about that much since 2014. Maybe a bit in 2015, and then it just kind of went away. I think the police clued in, and they were dealing with it. But apparently, this is one of the things that crashed over.
Let's talk about what Zoe Quinn has suffered. Okay. Now, I was in the media for some years. I had to, flee buildings with the other members of the staff because bomb threats, were called in because of a guest that I'd booked. I remember the host of my show joking as he, clicked on the key enabler to start the car that maybe the car was going to blow up because of death threats that had come in. I had an actual stalker who actually came into my house because of something that I had written. Now, I don't... What exactly was done to Zoe Quinn? She's not very clear on this, you understand.
Well, apparently death threats and
doxing.
And,
we know that she doxed herself. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, can I just make one point here quickly? I mean, the whole thing, her whole saga started with what appeared to be claims of abuse against her from a tiny wizard form or something like this. And they claimed at that time she had made up the whole thing.
Yes.
And I think she did. And I think that that's been the pattern all the way up. And if you want to talk about the book in light of Zoe Quinn, you go back to that and just see this as a larger version of that. So she's been pretty consistent in her pattern. Anyways.
Well, and she also, joking on Twitter. Oops. Oh, we DDoS'd a site, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty serious, DDoS, right?
Yeah.
Now, working in games has left me temporarily homeless. She was temporarily homeless before she got involved in games. My family harassed. Yeah, what family would that be? My friend's company destroyed for defending me. Would that be Phil Fish?
That would be Phil Fish. Yeah, he gets lots of compliments in this book.
Yeah. I'm going to stop making games. I already stopped making them, but I'm going to stop making them again, and my life threatened.
Mm-hmm.
Really, your life threatened. Okay, yeah, and nude pictures of her. Look, when you pose for nude photographs on a professional basis, right? And, people are printing nude photographs of me. You took money for pictures, naked pictures that were taken of you. And this Aaron guy, you see the hazards of assortative mating here.
Mm-hmm.
Something terrible has happened to American men and Canadian men as well. People make mistakes, dating mistakes, right? Sexual mistakes. I would suggest that if you were to boast to the world about your sexual involvement with a woman, she would have to be considerably more attractive than Zoe Quinn, because Zoe Quinn is not attractive in the slightest. Leave aside, the ways in which she's made herself hideous.
Well,
she's covered in tattoos, and yet she pulls off this trick of being fat without having any breasts, which is, that's quite the trick,
Maybe that's queer. I don't know. But in that Return to Kings article, they did run one of her, nudie pics when she was in the bloom of youth. And, she wasn't a complete mutt. She had the bloom of youth and that attractiveness that comes.
Well, look. There are a few 19-year-old girls who are not attractive to some degree.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, but the thing is, you look at that cover and you go, well, that's over with.
Well, yeah, but look, Zoe Quinn, the fine young capitalist, right? Raising money for charity. She wrecks this, okay? Zoe Quinn has been involved in a whole host of controversies and it seems that everyone that she has been involved with comes to regret it.
But doesn't get mentioned in this book, by the way.
Doesn't get mentioned in the book that you do not want to be involved with Zoe Quinn, even if you're a porn photographer, right? Because this woman got stiffed, right? Didn't get paid. Let's go Robin Williams. Why don't we talk about the Robin Williams controversy? Oh, well, that'd be kind of, pointless, because that's not in the book either.
Mm-hmm. Though her support, the support given to her by Obama and Justin Trudeau is mentioned, so.
There are no references listed.
Yeah, I know, but, she mentions that. She also
I kept waiting for her to explain exactly how Justin Trudeau had supported her, but nope.
Yeah.
She talks about testifying before the United Nations, and I was thinking, what, the Security Council or just a General Assembly? It was some sort of subcommittee. There are thousands of subcommittees of the United Nations, like this is any big deal, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know. I think at this point we got to sum up, and I'm going to sum up with this thought. It's the one I gave you initially right after reading the book, and that was, it's too late for Zoe Quinn. I'm going to take her, what little bit of her life story that I know, a small town girl that had a difficult time, and I'm simply going to say that, Trump is here to save girls like that. If he succeeds in bringing back industry to America, perhaps those towns will revive. And young women like her will not have to suffer like Zoe did. So there you go, Zoe.
Well, I'm impressed by your positive take on this. It's quite good, actually. I mean, my own view was that she is Wymerica personified. And that this, you want to talk about existentialism? This is an existential struggle. It's them or us. And speaking, wholly metaphorically, I take the view, exterminate the brutes.
Right.
Because they can't, if they thrive, we fail. Our civilization fails because, you look at someone, you look at bad people, and typically they have some positive attributes. I can't see any with Zoe Quinn. Zero. Right. She had 256 pages to give her side of the story. And she can't even tell us what it's like to be an independent game developer.
Yeah, that kind of is a big hole.
One of the most striking things about Zoe Quinn's book is how she reveals how little she knows about the business of which she is ostensibly in, the computer business, the personal computer business. So much of this book is whining about how women are kept out by the boys. If she had read, say, Stephen Levy's History Hackers, she would know that...
Yeah, we both read that. Yeah.
Yes.
We talked about that.
A woman called Roberta Williams, who with her husband Ken Williams, founded a company called Sierra Online, which was a huge company in the video games industry, and I guess what you could call the first generation of PC games.
Right, yeah.
She pretty much invented the text game.
Okay.
And, graphics came later.
Oh, okay.
But even today, people would remember games like the King Quest series.
Okay.
And
I don't, but...
You see, Roberta Williams is regularly included in the list of most influential people in the history of the computing industry or computer games. And it goes to prove that it's not really a question of whether you're a man or a woman. It's a question of whether you have anything to bring to the table.
Right, yeah. And just, as an aside, the fact that we both read Hackers, we got a little bit of a taste of, I guess, how the computer industry is written about. I mean, I'm certainly no expert at all, but, I know the types of things that they like to talk about, and they include things that Zoe has not included in her book. Discussions of operating systems and, early history of the computer industry, that kind of thing. It's all this stuff it seems most people find fascinating that are involved in that, but no fascination here.
Well, no, she doesn't know anything about it. For instance, she talks about the internet coming out of people's basements. No, actually, the internet came out of the Department of Defense, which is something that Stephen Levy goes into in great detail in his book. Now, there's this question of consent that Zoe Quinn has this mad obsession about. And she talks in her book about, for instance, that reporters shouldn't be allowed to embed tweets in stories unless they get the permission of the person who made the tweet. Now, this points to something which is really shocking about Zoe Quinn, but I suppose in another way it's not so shocking because she is representative in this way of almost every feminist online.
Oh, and yeah, I think there are a lot of people that are surprised at, the fact that they would get quoted anywhere, without their permission. I ran into that a lot when I was a working journalist. What? You can just take what I said and print it? Yeah.
Well, no, I'm not talking about, interviews. This goes to the thing which is crucial in understanding the internet, is that there's a public internet and there's a private internet. For instance, the emails that you get to your pop mail or to things like Gmail are private. And there's a public internet, and the public internet includes things like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, although you can set those private if you like. Now, she makes great fun of this. Oh my God, people getting off the public internet. Well, I'll just mention in that regard that before I started my trolling career a couple of years ago, when I was involved in writing about the mining industry, I had a Twitter account in which I published about 20,000 tweets. Now, what these were condensations of press releases about mining assays and the like, and as you can imagine, they were not very controversial.
Can't say I read very many.
I didn't get a lot of people being very upset or saying mean things to me. But here's the thing. The internet is, for the most part, a public forum, which means that when you say things, you can expect other people to respond. In fact, there would be no reason to be public unless you were expecting responses. You could just send people texts or send them emails if you wanted this to remain private. But these women like Zoe Quinn and these other feminists, they want the likes, they want the retweets, they want the hugs that you get from the internet, but they imagine the wickedness of someone saying, no, I don't like what you had to say. So much of the feminist internet, and there's a famous cartoon, maybe we can dig it down, which shows a woman shoveling shit over a wall, and she's so proud of herself, and then it starts coming back from the other direction. It's like, oh my God, I didn't expect this. How dare you?
Abuse.
Yes, abuse.
Yeah, okay.
One last thing, that feminists on the internet are very fond of variations on the construction. Oh, wouldn't it be much better world if, men just died off? Now, this is essentially a call for genocide, and yet they seem to be totally nonplussed, genuinely so, when men get angry reading this.
Sounds reasonable to me.
And she keeps talking about her career. And she talks about herself as a systemizer. And I'm thinking, no. You're all about feelings, which is the opposite of systemizing. There was a horrifying experience for me reading this book. And the extent to which that this book is, I'm curious to find out, how successful this book is. But I'm just going to go to Amazon.com.
Right.
And I'm going to check the ranking. Crash Override. Discounted, heavily discounted. But they do that with all these books, so that's not all that particularly. Let's see, how does it rank? Number 1 in books, computers and technology, games and strategy guides, game design. That's pretty hilarious, because there's nothing about game design in the book.
Lots of feelings, though.
Number 3 in books, politics and social sciences, sociology, abuse.
Well, if you're looking for depression...
Number 3 in books, computers and technology, security and encryption, privacy and online safety. Oh, one last thing I'll mention specifically. She talks about, things that you can do after you have been under attack. And she talks about formatting or reformatting disks or phones. And she uses the term factory reset. No. If there's anyone who reads this book and is tempted to take her advice, when you format a disk, I know this is like introductory stuff almost. When you format a disk, there's nothing left on it. It's not a factory reset. People think of factory reset, and they think that, that means that all the changes that I made to the phone, they will disappear and will go back to the settings, that existed when I picked it up from the store. No. Formatting is not like that at all.
Yeah, what she's talking about is something different. It's basically, isn't it reset to default or whatever, or something to that effect?
Yeah.
Default settings.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. But no, I think.
But what do
I think that Zoe Quinn's moment is past.
I think so. Yeah, I think she blew the movie offer, and there was discussion of what actress would play her. I think that Jennifer Lawrence was talked about.
Oh yeah, okay, Jennifer Lawrence.
I don't know. Maybe I'm making that. Maybe it was
Jennifer Lawrence is a very attractive woman indeed.
Yeah, but I think she's about as dumb as Zoe. But at any rate, I think that we've come to the end of our show here, Kevin. I'll give you one last thing to say before we hit the music, and then you're going to say something after the music.
Oh, well, no, the one last thing is if it's too bad that we don't, could have invited a priest on here to exorcise, do an exorcism of the show, which is necessary because we've talked about Zoe Quinn. But let's say goodbye, and then I'll say my rude thing.
Sure. I just want to say that Kevin was the one who suggested this topic. I never would have read this book if he hadn't done that, and I'm not thanking him for it. Okay, that's the end of episode 92 of Grace and Steel.
Hey, no one said that podcasting was all beer and Skittles, my friend.
Purple drink. Okay, that is the end of episode 92 of Grace and Steel. I'm Kevin Steele.
And I'm Kevin Michael Grace.
Go ahead.
And now we're back, and here's the expression of my Selenian disgust. And you've been warned, so, you listened through to the end, you had a chance to back out. Reading Zoe Quinn's book, Crash Override, having done so, I can now imagine what it would be like to be suffocated under an avalanche of soiled sanitary napkins.
Thank you, Mr. Welbeck.